here with Dr. Bonnie Kaplan, a University of Calgary professor and an expert on nutrition and mental health. Bonnie, you've told me that you've set up some charitable funds to support research on nutrition and mental health. But before we talk about the funds, could you explain why doing more research is so important now?
Oh, well, Natasha, it turns out there is over 100 years of research on individual nutrients. You can go back to the 1930s and see studies of people who looked at calcium and its effect on mental health, and zinc and B vitamins, etc. But what we've been finding with multi-nutrient or broad-spectrum micronutrient treatment is a much greater effect than individual nutrients, which makes perfect sense. I mean, we've evolved to need all the nutrients together. But in order to bring this exciting new research of multi-nutrient treatment out of the shadows and into the mainstream, well, research is really the best way to do that. So we have quite a few studies published, but we need a lot more randomized controlled trials.
I hear in your the public message that nutrition is not important. Can you tell me a little bit more about the importance of nutrition?
Yeah, that's very interesting as to why people don't think it's important. I think that the current feeling in 2016 is that nutrition is important for our overall health. I mean, newspaper articles and magazine articles galore on cardiovascular disease, diabetes, etc. But somehow, as soon as you go above the neck, as I say, I sometimes call some of my lectures nutrition above the neck, people have a harder time believing that nutrition is important for brain health. But in fact, we need nutrients in our brains every minute that we're alive. That's how metabolism happens in our brain. That's how we synthesize neurotransmitters, how we break them down, how we make everything work in our brain cells, how we make mitochondria work in all of our cells. And that's all in the brain.
So I can see now that research is very important and we need more. But Bonnie, why aren't the traditional funding sources supporting work in this important area?
That's a really interesting problem that we have faced, Natasha. The fact is that they do fund studies on single nutrients, or they fund studies on one or two nutrients in terms of boosting the impact of medication. But there's some kind of a block when it comes to broad spectrum treatment. And I think a lot of it has to do with something that all of us who study nutrition were trained in, and it's something we call the scientific method. The scientific method is that you study one independent variable at a time. And I think the lay public understands this too. If you want to change the behavior in your children, you change one thing at a time to see what works, and you focus on one thing at a time. Otherwise, we call it a confounded experiment. Well, that's very nice for the scientific method. I fully agree with it. It's how I was trained. But it's not the way the brain works. The brain needs, as far as I can see, and I've looked at an awful lot of metabolic pathways, it needs virtually all of the 50 or so micronutrients, minerals, vitamins, essential fatty acids, and amino acids. All of them, every single hour of every single day. And so when we, meaning all of us who study broad spectrum micronutrients, have submitted grant applications and panelists say, wait a minute, we'll fund this study, looks like a great study, but don't use a complicated formula. Resubmit it with one nutrient. We just, we pull our hair at that because they don't understand or are not thinking about how brain metabolism works. So that's the obstacle we've been facing.
You're saying that more research on broad spectrum micronutrient formulas is needed. And you're also saying that the usual funding sources like governments are rejecting grant proposals that do not test just an individual nutrient. But why, Bonnie? Why are you trying to raise money to support this research? I thought you were going to retire.
I am retiring, but what they are funding is single nutrient research. They are not yet open to looking at broad spectrum micronutrient research. And I have junior colleagues who are very much in need of funding to sustain their careers. Where this really hit home for me, Natasha, was about a year ago when I realized that I knew a couple of scientists, young scientists, who were changing fields, even though they felt passionate about the importance of studying broad spectrum micronutrients. they could not sustain their careers because they couldn't get funding. And that really troubled me. That's what triggered me to set up the two charitable funds, because these people need research. I think of it as bridge funding, because I'm sure in another few years, with enough money right now, these federal funding agencies are going to be much more open to it. I can see the handwriting on the wall, but they're not there yet.
Okay, so talk to me about the two funds. What are they and how are they going to be managed?
Okay, so some people think I set up foundations. I did not do that. I set up two donor-advised funds, which are managed by two established foundations. One, and the only difference is that one is in the US and one is in Canada. And that means that, like to use the jargon, the one in the US is a 501(c), I think that's right, fund, which means that people can get tax deductions if they make charitable donations to the fund. And the same thing with the one in Canada. So these two funds have been accumulating money for almost a year, and we've done very well. Together, we've had some major donations, and we've actually exceeded $300,000 thanks to the generosity of some major donors. All of that money is already committed to research, because I have a list of scientists who are well established, who have published in this area, and who have projects that are waiting to go. They're just waiting for funding. So that's how the two funds work.
Wonderful. But what type of proof is still needed to convince the general public, people, that nutrition is relevant for mental health?
Well, that's a very broad question. It's going to take a lot of research beyond just the multi-nutrient treatment. But within the field of multi-nutrient treatment, Natasha, what we really need are some more placebo-controlled randomized trials. Now, there are about 30 peer-reviewed scientific publications from around the world on broad-spectrum micronutrient formulas. And they're in both children and adults, and they're all very promising, and they all have a bigger effect than what you expect from psychiatric medication. So it's very promising. But there are only, of all those publications, a lot of them are different kinds of designs. There are only, I think it's 3 randomized trials. And of the 3 randomized trials, there's only one that used a placebo. The others are very legitimate. They used comparators. So like comparing broad spectrum micronutrient treatment to a single nutrient or a small version. But we need more with placebo controls, because that's the traditional highest standard of scientific data.
So, Bonnie, let's return to the charitable funds. Right now, how much fundraising is truly needed?
Well, it depends on how high my goals are, okay? As I said, we've had excellent generosity from both small and large donors and have raised over $300,000. But if I could double that tomorrow, it would all be committed. And actually, I think my goal right now is another $500,000. I think that would get us through about 5 years more of research, including fellowships for postdocs, for junior faculty, graduate student stipends, so that we can get more trainees studying this. I think that is a really reasonable goal.
What type of support are you looking for that you need to bring people on to this movement, this revolution, that we reclaim our knowledge on nutrition and we reclaim the healthy brain?
What I'm looking for right now is a very important step. If we can raise another $300,000 to $500,000, I think we will have some terrific research out of North America and some other countries, and it will really take us that next step to open the doors for further funding, further awareness. And so what I'm looking for is financial support for these charitable funds, not for myself, but for my junior colleagues.
Awesome. I have one more little question. So, Bonnie, you have a Facebook page, you have a YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. Where do I go to get more information, and where do I reach out to you?
Okay, thanks for asking that. On Facebook, the Facebook page is simply called Nutrition and Mental Health. And the YouTube channel there has several videos, and this interview will be on it also. If people want to watch anything like the lectures that are online, the TEDx talk from one of the other scientists, anything like that, just email me. And my email address is very simple. It's my last name, Kaplan, Kaplan, at ucalgary.ca.
Super. Well, we've been talking with Bonnie Kaplan today, university professor at the University of Calgary and an expert on nutrition and mental health. Thanks, Bonnie.
Thank you.